Here's the rewritten version as a single flowing narration, keeping the same events, tone, and roughly the same length. My name is Olia Owens, and I'm 33 years old. I was standing in my own kitchen at 11 at night, cradling my 6-day-old daughter against my chest, when my mother knocked on the door I'd given her a key to 3 years earlier. I didn't need to check the peephole to know who it was. Nobody else pounded like that, as though the world owed her an answer before she'd even asked the question. I opened the door with Nora asleep in my arms, and my mother didn't bother with hello. She swept past me into the living room like she was inspecting a property she believed, in her own mind, she still owned. Her eyes moved over the boxes of diapers, the bassinet in the corner, the framed photo of my late husband Grant on the mantel, and she sighed like the whole scene offended her. "We need to talk," she said. I told her it was late, that Nora had only just settled after 2 hours of crying, that whatever it was could wait until morning. But my mother had never waited for anything in her life. She dropped onto my couch, in my house, and folded her hands like she was about to hand down a ruling. "Your brother's family is moving in," she announced. Denny lost his job. Carla can't cover rent alone, and the kids need stability. This house has 3 bedrooms. You're only using 2. I actually laughed, certain for a moment she was joking. Denny was 36 and had lost 4 jobs in 6 years, each time through some circumstance he insisted wasn't his fault. Carla had never held a job in all the years I could remember. And here was my mother, sitting in my living room, declaring their chaos to be my emergency. I reminded her, calmly, that this was my house. Grant and I had bought it 4 years earlier, and my name alone was on the deed because Grant had insisted on it when we married, back when he still had the habit of shielding me, even when I didn't think I needed shielding. After the accident, after I buried him 7 months ago, after I spent the final trimester of my pregnancy sleeping alone in a bed built for 2, the house became mine in every legal sense that existed. My mother waved her hand like deeds were mere suggestions. "Family comes first, Olia. You have the room. You have the space. Denny's kids need a yard. What do you need all this space for? It's just you and the baby. Just me and the baby." As if Nora were an afterthought. As if the 6 days I'd spent alone in a hospital room, with no husband there to hold my hand through delivery, meant nothing in her arithmetic. Something cold settled into my chest, not panic, but clarity. "No," I said. She blinked, as if the word had physically struck her. "No, Mom. Denny is not moving into my house. Carla is not moving into my house. Their kids are not moving into my house. This is Nora's home. It's the only permanent thing her father left her. And I won't turn it into a shelter for a man who can't keep a job." My mother's expression shifted the way it always did when she didn't get her way, from persuasion to accusation. She called me selfish. She said Grant would be ashamed of how cold I'd become. She said blood was supposed to mean something, that I was choosing a house over my own brother. She rose to her feet, her voice climbing, and Nora stirred against my shoulder, her small face crumpling before the crying started. "Get out," I said, and I meant it more fully than I'd ever meant anything. "You need to leave now." She didn't go quietly. She warned me I'd regret this, that family doesn't forgive betrayal, that she'd raised me to know better. I walked to the door and opened it while she was still talking, standing there with my daughter until she finally snatched up her coat and stormed into the hallway. Before she left, she turned and said the words that would echo in my head for the next 4 days, "This isn't over. Denny needs somewhere to go, and you have the space. I'll make sure you understand what family actually means." I said nothing. I simply shut the door and turned both locks, then stood in the dark hallway with my daughter's heartbeat against mine, thinking about how naive I'd been to believe motherhood would finally buy me peace from a woman who'd spent her whole life dictating what everyone else owed her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the nursery, in the rocking chair Grant had built with his own hands the month before he died, staring at the ceiling, and I made a decision. If my mother wanted to find out what family truly meant, I would show her precisely what my name on that deed could do. For days passed, and in that time I did something my mother never expected. I called a locksmith and rekeyed every lock on the property: front door, back door, garage, even the side gate Denny used to sneak through as a teenager. I called my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Priscilla Bain who had handled Grant's estate, and asked her to draft something specific, a formal notice, the kind that couldn't be argued away in a kitchen at 11 at night, stating plainly that the property belonged solely to me, Olia Owens, and that anyone attempting to reside there without my written consent would be treated as a trespasser. I also had a video intercom installed at the front gate, complete with camera and speaker, so I'd never again have to open my door to someone who mistook pounding for negotiation. On the fourth day, at precisely 10 in the morning, while Nora napped in her bassinet, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Checking the camera feed on my phone, I saw my mother's sedan, and behind it, a moving truck. My stomach dropped, then, oddly, settled. Some part of me had known this was coming. My mother never made threats she didn't intend to carry out, and "I'll make sure you understand what family actually means" had never been an empty sentence from her. I watched on the screen as my mother stepped out of her car, Denny climbed from the passenger seat, and Carla emerged from the truck with their 2 kids trailing behind, along with 2 men I didn't recognize, hired help, presumably, for the furniture. My mother marched up to the gate as though she still held a key, as though nothing had changed. She pressed the intercom button, her face impatient and entitled, already irritated that the gate hadn't swung open for her. I pressed my own button and let my voice carry through the small speaker: "You need to leave." 4 words. No explanation, no negotiation, no softening. I had spent 33 years justifying myself to that woman, absorbing her disappointment as though it were payment owed for the crime of existing outside her control. I was finished. Grant used to say that some conversations weren't worth having twice, and this was one of them. My mother's face twisted with fury on the screen. She began shouting into the intercom, insisting I open the gate, accusing me of choosing pride over blood, claiming Grant's death had turned me into someone cold and unrecognizable. Behind her, I saw Denny shift uncomfortably, and I realized, not for the first time, that he'd never actually asked me for anything himself. This entire scheme had been my mother's design from the start, orchestrated the way she orchestrated everything, rearranging people like furniture in a house that was never hers to arrange. I didn't answer the shouting. I only watched. Then Priscilla's courier arrived, timed with her usual precision, and walked to the gate holding a sealed envelope, asking for my mother by name. When she tore it open, I watched through the camera as her expression shifted from fury to something closer to disbelief as she took in the words: "Trespassing, formal notice, sole legal owner, law enforcement will be contacted." Her hand began to shake, and then, in a moment I'll remember for the rest of my life, her phone slipped from her other hand and struck the concrete, its screen splintering into a web of cracks at her feet. She stared down at it as though it were a metaphor she couldn't quite decode, something breaking that she couldn't blame on me, couldn't argue with, couldn't talk her way around. Denny finally stepped forward, quiet and almost apologetic, saying they'd figure something else out. Carla was already herding the kids back toward the truck, her face flushed with an embarrassment that had clearly been building long before they arrived. My mother stood there a moment longer, looking at the gate, the camera, the house she no longer had any claim to, then turned and walked back to her car without another word. I picked Nora up when she began to cry at the sound of the truck pulling away, holding her against my chest in the nursery Grant had built. For the first time since his death, what I felt wasn't grief and wasn't fear. It was steadiness. My daughter would grow up in a home that was truly ours, protected, permanent, untouchable by anyone who believed family obligation should only ever flow in one direction.